Hello my friends, today we are going to be doing a little bit of a tier list for the laboratory researches, for the Kerrigan upgrades, and for the Spear of Adun upgrades. In the past, I've done tier lists for the various units within StarCraft 2, however I've never done one for the supplemental stuff, so I figured that today would be a good day to give that a go. Now, I am gonna try this with the tier list, and that is I'm going to define the tiers beforehand. S tier is for things that are consistently incredible. A tier is for things that are inconsistently incredible or consistently great. And then following that structure, B tier for inconsistently great things or consistently good. C tier is for consistently good or inconsistently good or consistently mediocre. And then finally, D tier is for things that are inconsistently mediocre. And I think this is a very fair way to do things. I don't think there are any F tiers in this tier list, because an F tier to me is something that would be an active detriment to you just by having. And worst comes to worst, even the bad things in here, you have them and you just don't use them. They don't hurt you by having picked it. Whether or not they are good, well, that's D tier then. So there are over 50 things that we have to get through, which means I'm going to try to be fairly concise with my reasoning, but I will try to explain to the best of my ability. Let's begin with the Ultra Capacitors upgrade, which is 5% increased attack speed for every attack upgrade that you have on a unit. This is it's consistently good. This is going to be a very solid B tier simply because it provides a nice benefit for doing something that you are already planning on doing. This upgrade is never going to break the bank. It's never going to change the way that you play the game, or it's not going to win a mission for you or something like that, but it's also really nice to have. It's also significantly better than vanadium plating, which is 5% increased health for every armor upgrade you have. Now, vanadium plating has three main issues that cause it to be pretty consistently mediocre as opposed to the consistent goodness of the ultra capacitors. And those are: 1, if your opponents die from you attacking 15% faster, you're also taking about 15% less damage. Which means that in terms of durability increasing, ultra capacitors is about the same. However, 2, armor upgrades are often the thing that you cut. Let's say that you're going for a mech-based composition, something really, really heavy in gas. It's very, very common to get rid of armor upgrades or save them for later. And if you're going for vanadium plating, then it means you're not getting the benefit, but it's still worth getting the attack upgrades first. And then number 3 is that it increases the amount that it takes for things like medics or science vessels to heal people to full. So if you compare it to ultra capacitors, which is effectively not taking damage, that is significantly better for your energy reserves and keeping you topped off compared to taking 15% extra damage. And as a result, vanadium plating is not a bad upgrade. However, it is pretty consistently mediocre. And as a result, it is in C tier. Next is orbital depots. Orbital depots I'm also going to put in C tier, simply because it is replaceable by the SCV upgrade that allows you to multi-build. If you have the ability to multi-build a depot, it is not that much longer than orbitally dropping a depot, and then you get to pick the other thing. So it does have a benefit. It's not a huge one though. Next up is micro-filtering, which is an upgrade that you cannot replace with any armory upgrades. And as a result, I think that makes it pretty decent. It increases the amount that you get per Vespian cargo trip from 4 to 5. And that's just free real estate. I was talking earlier with vanadium plating on how sometimes you're really gas starved and you have to pick to cut stuff. Well, if you have 25% additional gas, it is much easier to not have to do that. And as a result, I think it's consistently good. For the next one, we are going to do automated refinery and the extractor and the assimilator at the same time. And I think that they are all great. I think they all deserve to be in A tier because, first of all, you can get a ton of extra gas in a mission by just popping those up way before you need them, because you don't need the workers. It's also very cheap compared to building and maintaining one. So for example, the automated refinery is 100 minerals. However, the normal refinery is 75 minerals, and you have to build 150 minerals worth of SCVs to pilot it. And every SCV costs one supply, which when you equate that into the cost of a depot, is 12.5 minerals each. That means that if you want to build and saturate a regular refinery, it takes 275. 25. Okay, it's 100. Rather, it's 75 plus 150 plus 37.5, which is 262.5 minerals. That's a lot of minerals, dude, compared to 100 and getting it set up slower and costing 3 extra supply. All these are just very nice. I like them a lot. A tier. Command Center Reactor is actually pretty good. I don't think it's as strong. One sec, I'm getting a phone call. I'm back. Sorry about that. People wanted the leftovers I left at my parents' house, and I had to tell them that it was in fact okay to eat them. What were we doing? Command Center Reactor. I like Command Center Reactor. I think it's pretty good. The ability to pump out a bunch of SCVs really quick is very nice. However, it is a little bit overshadowed by the fact that as Terran, once you have the mule unlocked, it's not bad to just make another command center instead. Then you have more than enough SCV production, and you have double mules. So as a result, I think that it is a B tier because the upgrade itself is not bad. However, it does, it's kind of redundant. Now, the Raven is a very interesting unit because it costs 200 gas, which is a lot of gas, and it's got some really annoying things going for it. The durability is terrible. The unit very consistently just, like if you have it in your full army hotkey, it just flies to the front and dies. Auto turrets are not very good. There are barely any invisible things in the entire campaign. You can get some burrowed Zerg and stuff, but not a whole lot. And Seeker Missile, I don't think is particularly good against the enemy just because of the way that they fight. Like, you can every once in a while get a cool shot, but it's not nearly as good against the enemy as it is against you. And yet, I am still willing to give the Raven an inconsistently good, which is C tier, because Point Defense Drone, when it is good, is awesome. It really, really is awesome. Very, very strong, particularly against Protoss enemies, at protecting your flyers. And it can block stuff like Kerrigan's attacks, which is crazy, unless she goes up into melee and starts using her little shoulder blades. But it can do some seriously crazy things. Point Defense Drone is awesome. However, it is not always awesome. It's pretty inconsistent when it's actually good, and the rest of the unit just doesn't really fit into the campaign that well. So, and it's clunky. So I think that C tier is very fair. On the other hand, I think the Vessel is better. Yeah, I think that it's better. Partially because if you have a bunch of vessels in your army, the kind of like medevacs, they'll stop from just charging into the enemy because someone is destined to get hit, and then they'll stop and start healing stuff. And I think that's really nice. Additionally, Irradiate is way better than Seeker Missile is against Zerg on Char. And that's the end game, right? That is one of the major points that you have to be thinking about, and everything is Zerg there, and Irradiate is just so good against them. So I think Science Vessel is a solid B. The Tech Reactor, The Tech Reactor, I don't like it. It's got a big issue where, well, if you start with a Tech Reactor, it's actually quite nice. You know, it's very, very reasonable. However, infrastructure in StarCraft 2 is very cheap. If you look at the balance of how many or how much money you spend on production structures compared to army, every production structure is going to pop out 10 to 20 times its cost in units. So the actual amount that it takes to just build another factory is very low. Additionally, the build time for it is for a tech reactor is longer than a tech lab, which means that at the beginning of a mission, such as All In, if you want to just pop down a tech lab and start building siege tanks ASAP, you have to wait twice as long before you can do that, and that can hurt. That can be bad. So it is obviously powerful. However, it does have downsides that you can never recover from, right? You can't pick to build a tech lab anymore, which means that you're always going to pay the extra money for it. You're always going to take the extra time to build it, all that kind of stuff. And as a result, I think it's C tier. It's so easy to build another factory or starport instead. Orbital Strike, on the other hand, it's ridiculous. It's so strong. We all know by now that it's one of the strongest abilities in the game. And the only reason that it doesn't get S tier is because it is inconsistent. If you want to play Factory, if you want to play Starport, if you want to play Mercenaries, it literally is dead weight. It does nothing. If you want to do anything infantry related, the ability to either A, cheese stuff, or B, just have instant reinforcements like you're playing Warp in Protoss, both of those are insane. It is so good. But it, as I said, inconsistent, so it does get A tier. But it is a strong A. Next up is the Shrike Turret. Shrike Turret does 5 damage, and it cannot increase its damage. And that means that as the campaign progresses, as enemies get more and more armor upgrades, it does worse and worse and worse. At the very beginning, against an enemy Zergling that does not have an armor upgrade, it takes 7 shots to kill one, which is already very long. However, at the end of the campaign, if you are, say, being attacked by an Ultralisk on All In, which happens all the time, well, it is doing half of a damage per shot against an Ultralisk. Half of a damage per shot. It effectively doesn't exist. So it is, at best, it's mediocre and it's very inconsistent, except it consistently gets worse as time goes on, so it is useless. On the other hand, Fortified Bunker is actually pretty decent. I like it quite a bit. So it gives 150 HP to a bunker, or rather all bunkers, and that does more than just give you bonus HP. So the way that repairs work is that it is based on the build time of a thing. So if it has the same build time, but you increase the amount of HP, the amount of HP per second that you repair goes up, which means fortified bunkers are harder to kill while being repaired by a significant margin. Additionally, the cost stays the same, which means that the dollar per HP is also improving for you, which is really, really, really good. As a result, I think fortified bunkers are inconsistently great. And the reason that it's inconsistent and going in B tier is because, well, if you're not going for infantry, you don't really want bunkers. So you would prefer to have the stuff we're going to talk about next. And that's really it. It's inconsistent as a result. Next up is the Planetary Fortress, which I'm just going to throw into A tier. These things are amazing. And they're also very consistent. So first of all, they have 1 billion trillion HP. They do a lot of damage, and they do that damage in an area, but you don't necessarily always want to morph a command center into a planetary ASAP. However, the fact that if something goes wrong during your playthrough and you have this available, you can always hit the button and morph your main command center into a juggernaut that'll keep you alive as an anchor is really, really, really nice. Yeah, you will lose the ability to drop mules because you're not an orbital anymore, but if you were gonna die, and this is the thing that saves you, it is fantastic to always have that button available. As a result, I love Planetary, easy A. Perdition Turret, on the other hand, it does do a lot of damage. The fact that they go underground, so enemies get lured over to them, they pop up, and they put out a lot of damage in an AoE is very nice. However, they are frustrating, because SCVs, if you have a line of them, will continuously run over your Perditions, and then the Perdition cannot pop up because an SCV is on top of it, like repairing something nearby. Which means that you wasted your money on a brick. If they could just, if they could pop up while SCVs were there, I actually think Perditions would be really, really, really solid. However, the frustrating nature of them means that I think that they have to be in C tier. Now, C tier is pretty good compared to the Predator, which, I don't need to explain it. The Predator is just an overpriced unit, really deep into the tech tree, but it would only be good in the beginning of the campaign, and if it didn't cost as much. It is the epitome of D tier. The only reason it's not F tier is because if you picked it, you can still not build it, and you're not going to torpedo your own life. The Hercules is a unit I actually kind of like a decent bit. I think it's quite good. It is by far and away the best way to drop anything in the campaign, and particularly if you are going for a factory-based playstyle, it is so infinitely better than the medevac that, yeah, I'm always willing to go for Hercules. Now, I don't think that every mission is a good dropping mission. However, it really does open up a lot of opportunities to play in a way that you otherwise couldn't. It's good for infantry, it's good for factory play. It goes around with your flyer stuff, even if you just want to keep like SCVs around to repair your flyers or battlecruisers, I think it's good for that. So yeah, I think that it is a very, very reasonable B tier. Simply because there's not a huge number of missions you want to drop on, but it is cool for those. Also, if you keep a couple SCVs with auto repair, and you're going for factory stuff, the SCVs will auto repair vehicles inside of the Hercules while they're both in, which is really cool. It's really fun. Now we have Cellular Reactor, plus 100 energy for units maximum, and 100 energy for units when they spawn. This is straight up the first S tier. It is so good. It is really hard to explain how good this is until you start using it a lot and realize, oh, my units spawn with 3 times as much energy as normal. It's normally 50, now it's 150. The ability for any cloak unit to cloak for a really long time right after spawning is amazing. Battlecruisers Yamatoing the moment they spawn, amazing. Medics having, 450 health worth of regeneration out of the box, and same with science vessels. Ridiculous. Point defense drones the moment that a unit spawns. It's all so good, because one of the big things with spellcasters is that they normally have this big time limit before they can actually do anything. And it completely removes that, and every single style benefits from spellcasters. Even if you're not a big micro person, you still probably are using medics or science vessels. And this combos incredibly well with them. So it works with every style, and it does a huge, huge benefit. So S tier. Now, compared to Cellular Reactor, Regenerative Biosteel is not good. It gives you the same base regeneration as Zerg units, which is, it's not enough. It just really isn't. Particularly because vehicles, you don't have that many of them compared to infantry. If this ability applied to, for example, Marines, and you had 150 of them, and they all stimmed, then having the ability to patch all of them up for free with Biosteel would be amazing. But you're not going to have 150 siege tanks unless you are living in Magical Christmas Land. So, you know, it's like, oh, my 7 mech units are getting a Zerg regenerate. No, it's not good. When's the last time that the base regeneration of an Ultralisk mattered? It doesn't. So it's not going to for mecha units either. It is bad, And it is just better HP efficiency to go for cellular reactor and then get medics or get science vessels. D tier. Hive Mind Emulator is a very interesting one because it is the only thing on this list really that can solo a mission on its own that's also a really, really, really hard mission. And that's all in, right? Hive Mind Emulator is incredible on All In Air. It is the best of all of the researches in the game, I think, for that one specific mission, which is one of the hardest missions. So that's really, really huge. However, due to the rubric that we're currently using, it is fundamentally inconsistent because it doesn't work on, when I kind of think of like the hard missions, I think of Engine of Destruction, Media Blitz, Supernova, Maw of the Void, and then everything on Char. And it can only do 3 out of those 7 missions. As a result, it is the king of the castle in A tier. Actually, it is, if you're on Char, it is S tier. But it unfortunately cannot do things in a lot of places, which means that it does get dropped down to A. The Side Disruptor, on the other hand, is also inconsistent because it only works against Zerg. However, it is significantly weaker. It is good at what it does. It provides a nice little area that is a debuff for enemy movement and attack speed. However, the range is only 6, which is really, really low. Or it might be 7. I don't remember. It's one of the two. However, that is not a good number. It is very short, and the problem with that range means it has to be like right behind your bunkers in order to be effective on a bunker line. It's basically non-viable if it's behind planetary fortresses because they're too big. And the enemy, you know, on brutal difficulty, how the enemy will target fire SCVs? They have that same attack priority against Psi Disruptors specifically, which means that Hydras and stuff will mow it down, or Mutas will dive it and burn it down, and it is expensive to repair, and it doesn't build fast, which means it doesn't repair fast. So it's kind of annoying in that way, and it's an unfortunate thing. If the range was a little bit bigger, or if it was more durable, I think it would be better. And when you can get it up and you can keep it alive, it is strong. As a result, I'm going to say it's inconsistently good, and it is in C tier. Moving on to the Kerrigan abilities. These are going to be significantly faster, I think. Kinetic Blast is S tier, because every single mission has things that are worth kinetic blasting that are high-value targets that need to be eliminated. Particularly siege tanks. Just keep blasting siege tanks and you're going to be happy. It doesn't cost much, it has a really long range, and it does solid damage on a short cooldown. It is the always good ability. Heroic Fortitude, on the other hand, is actually not bad. It's a lot of bonus hit points and bonus hit point regeneration. The only reason it doesn't get picked much is because the other things on the tier are very good. However, I think it is solid. Like, if you look at the actual stats that it gives you, it is reasonable. And as a result, I think it deserves B tier. Leaping Strike, on the other hand, is a little bit of a mixed bag, because it permanently reduces your attack range. It does give you bonus attack damage, which is good. However, the ability itself, A, is very mobility enhancing, and B, is the single strongest damage output tool that Zerg has. Nothing else can put out as much DPS as Leaping Strike. So I'm going to say that it is best in class, and that class is very, very good. However, you can't always use it because you don't always want to be diving in. That is A tier to me. Crushing Grip, on the other hand, well, not really on the other hand. I actually think that Crushing Grip is just also A tier. The stun is really, really nice. The cooldown is kind of long. The damage is not good. However, it is a big area stun that works on almost everything. However, it doesn't work on important heroic targets, which obviously is a major downside. And it does have that longer cooldown. But besides that, it's incredible. It really does a lot of stuff. I don't want to talk it down. It is easy A tier. You can stick on this for your entire playthrough, like Kinetic Blast, Crushing Grip. If you go for all of Heart of the Swarm, you're going to be happy. What do we have next? Chain Reaction. Chain Reaction gives you 40 bonus damage on your attacks. Well, if there's enough enemies nearby, and there pretty much always is. It is a lot of damage. I really like it. I think it is another consistently great ability. The only time that it's bad is that if you're on Leaping Strike, you get minus range to your auto attacks, which means that it is kind of tough to use this. But it is a decent tool that costs no energy for every other circumstance, and that's amazing. Now, Psionic Shift is the final one, and I do like it because it gives you that movement speed bonus, and it can put out a lot of area damage because it sweeps through, deals 50. However, just like Leaping Strike, it really puts Kerrigan into vulnerable places. And I think that it puts her in much more vulnerable places because you pass through the enemy instead of jumping over to them. As a result, I think it's just a little bit more risky to use for about the same benefit. And I'm going to put it on B tier as a result. Zergling Reconstitution is good. I like it. Particularly in the early half of the campaign. So the way that it maths out is if you are constantly reconstituting Zerglings, it's about 500 minerals per minute. That is a lot of minerals. It is a lot of minerals. Particularly in the early half of the campaign where you are stuck on one base a lot of the time. It's like an extra third to half of a mineral line. That is crazy. For example, putting that in perspective, it is about the same as having 2 orbital commands dropping mules. That is a lot of Zerglings. However, it does sort of lose value as time goes on. It's just the Zerglings aren't that good in the later stages of the campaign. As a result, I'm going to say that it is a B tier because it is great at the beginning and then it kind of peters off. Improved Overlords is very similar to the depot thing, and in the same way that you can just build with multi-build more depots, you can also queue up a bunch of Overlords, except for I think that queuing up a bunch of Overlords is even easier, which makes these not as good. It does increase the supply that Overlords give, but I just don't feel that's nearly as necessary. I don't know. I feel like supply with Zerg is just never an issue compared to supply with Terran. And as a result, is C tier, but lower C tier. The next 3 abilities are ones that I actually think are really interesting. First is Wild Mutation. So you target it in an area, everybody gets a 200 point shield, and they get a big attack speed increase for a bit. If you're doing stuff like Zerglings, it is a fantastic ability, and it's really the only way to make the Zergling scale super well into the later stages of the game. It's also fantastic with Hydralisks if you can get them attacking in the back with the buff, and it really helps them against siege tanks. It is good for stacks of mutas, all that kind of stuff. I really do like the ability, though it's not great with things like Impalers who don't benefit from increased attack speed. It's not great with Ultralisks because the shield just isn't very much for an Ultra. And it's not great for Broodlords, which those are 3 of the big, like, heavy hitting units that you want to spam a lot of later on. As a result, I think the unit or the ability is great depending on your army composition. So it's inconsistent, and that would be a B tier. Spawn Banelings is also B tier, honestly. I think that it is in the same general logic where a lot of the time it is this monster ability that does so much damage in an area. However, other times, it's got a little bit of an issue where all the Banelings just get vaporized before they actually get to do anything. So, really, really good when it hits, not necessarily as good on some missions. And that is a B tier. And then Mend is not as strong as these other abilities. However, it is really consistent. And as a result, I'm going to put it in B tier as well. All 3 of the things on this row, I think, are B tier. However, they all cover each other's weaknesses really well, and as a result, I think that the row itself is like A tier, because no matter the situation you're in, one of these 3 is really nice. I think that's really good game design, right? Where none of these are super, super oppressive, but they all like form up together to be this awesome little power couple. Or not couple. You know what I mean. Now, speaking of power couples, twin drones is ridiculous. It is going straight into S tier. Not only, compared to SCV Reactor, are you getting, well, a ridiculous number of drones because you are paying half the cost, but Zerg is larva gated before they can actually do anything, and it costs half the larva as well, which is insanely, insanely, insanely good for getting saturated really quickly. And the fact that it only costs half the supply of a normal drone because they're one half each means that, for example, if you are just playing at the beginning of the campaign and you want to saturate 2 bases, that is 44 workers, 16 on each mineral line, and then 6 on 4 gas geysers. Or rather, 3 on 4 gas geysers. However, if you have an autogas and you have twin drones, to get that same 44 workers worth of value, it only takes 16 supply. That is 28 extra supply that you get to turn into army, which means A, you don't need as many overlords early on, B, you get your economy set up way faster, and then C, when you're maxed out, your army is bigger, which means you're gonna lose less stuff during the fights, which means that you don't need as much economy to replace things, so you're gonna get extra money. It's a win-win-win. Twin drones is just like Zerg incarnate. It lets you speed up and go so quick. Vespene efficiency, on the other hand, we have Malignant Creep first. I like Malignant Creep. It's bonus attack speed and move speed on creep. I actually don't know if it gives you more move speed. I don't think it does, but it makes your creep spread faster. However, at the end of the campaign, the enemy is really good at clearing all of your creep, and you don't get any benefits for attacking into the enemy with this, which you have to do a lot in the later stages of Heart of the Swarm. As a result, I think that it tapers off, and I'm going to say that it is a solid B tier, because when you get to fight on this Malignant Creep, it's amazing. You just don't always get to do that. Then Vespene efficiency, I don't think that Zerg needs gas nearly as much as the other races do, particularly because they can get these auto gases real quick, and that just kind of sustains them. So I'm going to put this in C tier, not necessarily because it's bad, but because I just don't see the need for Zerg gas nearly as much. Even Banelings don't cost that much gas. Now we have another set of 3 that is very similar to these guys, where none of them are perfect, but they all kind of overlap in a way that means that they're always good. Infest Broodlings just puts a lot of bodies onto the field. It is good, particularly in combination with chain attack, so that you tag a lot of people and spawn a lot of Broodlings. Or, if you're feeling real fun, it works with Apocalypse, which just gives you about 1 billion Broodlings. It is insanely cool. However, Broodlings are still Broodlings, and particularly if you're not going for anything that has melee upgrades, the Broodlings don't do much damage. However, if you are going for things with melee upgrades, then the Broodlings get in the way of your melee units, unless you're going aberrations. So as a result, I think it's solid. It's a solid B tier. Fury is one of those abilities, if you can stack it up, it gives Kerrigan so much damage. Once again, great with chain attack. However, there are a lot of times in the later stages of the campaign where you don't actually want to be attacking as much with Kerrigan. You kind of want to do like the hit and run, chip people away with your spell casting stuff. And if you have Fury, then it doesn't do anything. As opposed to like Spawn Broodlings, which is middle of the road because it always activates with any Kerrigan damage. So it is very strong sometimes, and other times it doesn't do anything. I'm going to say that's B tier. Now, if you want to be that spellcaster mode, then you have ability efficiency, which isn't as good in the prolonged fights as the other abilities. It's still pretty decent, but it's really good if you need to do that shipping type stuff. So I think it's also B tier. All of these together form a really nice A tier synergy list. But all of them on their own, I think, are pretty reasonably B tier because none of them are perfect. They all have weaknesses. Speaking of imperfect, let's talk about the ultimate abilities. Now, Apocalypse is just an easy A tier. It's consistently great. It just does a lot of damage. The channel is not that hard to do, but it's never going to be S tier because you do have to live through the channel. However, it's a big boom, and there's a lot of things that are worth big booming in this game. Leviathan, on the other hand, is fine. It puts out a decent amount of damage. You do have to micro the spellcasting, which can be annoying. And the end of the campaign has a lot of anti-air. So I can't position it anywhere higher than B. However, it does just sit there for a really long period of time, and if you have air upgrades, it does a lot of damage and it does soak a lot of shots, which can be very useful. Then there's drop pods. I don't really think drop pods are that good. The Primal Zerg, they don't get your mutations or anything, which sucks, because this would be an amazing ability if it did. However, they tend to just all die, and I think that's really sad. C tier. And then finally, we have all of the Protoss stuff. And with the Protoss stuff, we're going to have to pay attention to a different angle of things, and that is how much Solarite does a thing cost. Because unlike all the other tiers where you're only competing against the things in your tier, you're competing against everything else as Protoss. So it really does matter. As a result, something like Deploy Pylon, which as an ability is probably about C tier, it doesn't do that much and it does cost a lot of Solarite, is actually getting bumped up to B tier, simply because it is free. And having an amount of free flexibility while you're investing your points into really, really powerful abilities means that, if you just need an emergency pylon for one of a million different reasons, it's always here to have your back, and that's really nice. The effect of having the pylon, not that good. It doesn't win games, but it's nice. It's one of those good to haves. Chronosurge, on the other hand, I am also going to put in B. The cost is not that high. However, the effect is fine. It's really quite good in the early stages of a mission to fully saturate, or if you decide to bank up a bunch of money and then power out like 5 of one unit off of a robo or off of a Stargate, or just get out a Tal'Darim mothership really quick, that sort of a thing. But I'd say after the first 4 minutes of a mission, it's kind of useless. And then your Solarite could have gone somewhere else. That's not bad though. That's really not bad. I think that is the epitome of B tier, where it's good, but it needs to be part of a greater strategy. Orphan Reinforcements, on the other hand, is bad. 50 Solarite is a lot. And you are getting, comparing it to Zergling Reconstitution is very telling. Because Zergling Reconstitution you pick and then you don't have to invest anything into, and it's 500 minerals per minute. On the other hand, this is if you are using it on cooldown and you have infinite solar energy, because you don't actually get enough to use it on cooldown every time. You are getting, 175, 175 plus 100 plus 100. Is 550, 650, including the pylon resources worth of stuff. But you have to use all your solar energy forever to get it, which is, comparing that is night and day because of how easy this is and how this would take everything from you to barely be able to outperform it. Orbital Strike is pretty good. It doesn't cost anything, which is quite nice. I think that it is just a reasonable A. I think that in terms of power level, it's probably a B, but in the same realm as Deploy Pylon, costing no Solarite, I want this other thing, and then I get left with Orbital Strike, and I'm very happy with that. It's good. Temporal Field, on the other hand, is, C tier. The ability to stun the enemies it's actually quite good. The stun is very nice. The big issue is that killing the enemies is kind of like stunning them, and Orbital Strike and Solar Lance both kill the enemies. This also doesn't work on heroic units. It just slows them instead. And once again, this does work on heroic units, and Solar Lance does work on heroic units, and most heroic units are armored, which means that Orbital Strike does the bonus damage against them. It feels weird, and it's just not superb as a result. Now, Solar Lance is S tier. We all knew this. Very, very easy, very simple. It is the most flexible Spear of Adun ability. The energy cost, for some reason, is only 50, as opposed to Warp-In Reinforcements, which is 75. The cooldown is only 1 minute, and it does 600 damage that you can do crazy, crazy geometry with. You're playing like Hanzo here, and it's just so good. It is so good that nobody runs the speed run for Legacy of the Void because it's all about memorizing Solar Lances. That is 90% of that run, and it's so boring as a result because Solar Lance is so dominating. Nexus Overcharge is a B. It's got a really long range. The radar effect that it gives is really nice, and it doesn't cost anything. You know what? No, it's A. It's A. It does a lot of damage. It fires really fast. The Nexus has a lot of HP. Oh, no. I have a reason it's B. It does so many things really, really, really well, and it doesn't cost anything. However, it does cause the enemies to focus fire your Nexus, and you don't have the ability to repair it, which means you're really relying on shield batteries to keep it alive, which can be a little bit eh. What are we missing? Oh, we did auto gas already. Okay, we did auto gas. That's up here, so that's the next one on this tier. Warp Harmonization is the one that allows your robos and stargates to be transformed into warp-in things, and they warp in 20% faster than they build. I think this is a C, simply because it's cool. It's cool, but the coolness is not that good. Like, comparatively, it competes a lot with Chrono Surge for just being able to pump out things from a advanced tech structure. But the number of times that you're going to, like, deploy a pylon and then warp in 5 Phoenixes is very, very low. It just doesn't come up that often. And it does cost a lot to do this. And you're giving up a pretty decent ability to do so. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's bad by any means. It just feels very outclassed, and it feels like the campaign is missing a mission that would make it really good. Mass Recall. I like Mass Recall. I think that it is not always the most useful thing in the world. However, it is very cheap, it's got a very short cooldown, and you get 200 shields on everybody that recalls, which means even if all your units are at home, it's often good to just recall them to get a bunch of shields and then fight an attack wave. It is a very, very solid B tier in my opinion. Shield Overcharge, on the other hand, is the same idea, except you can attack people with it. As a result, I am going to put it in A tier because I like winning the missions, not just defending. Phoenix is an interesting one. Phoenix is so strong. He's effectively unkillable, and he can kill most anything. He is a havoc monster. It does cost a lot of Solarite, though. 100 Solarite is so much. But at the same time, he's cheap, his cooldown is not that long, and he does a lot of damage. I think that we can put him in, he's consistently good at that nice solid B tier. Matrix Overload. This is the one that gives all of your pylon power fields the ability to buff all of your units, and as long as they're inside of the power field or for a little bit after, they get move and attack speed. This one, I think it's pretty good. It's just a solid default, you know? I think that everything on this tier is quite nice. I think this is a very reasonable B once again, because a lot of the time when you're out and about on the map, you won't necessarily have this, unless you go Energizers and you're constantly deploying and undeploying them, but it's honestly just really annoying. But if you're doing anything defensively, it's real good. It is fantastic on Salvation, the final mission that's the time defense. I love it there. But at the same time, it's not a game winner. What can be a game winner is Guardian Shell. This ability is a very good A. The fact that if a unit dies, instead it doesn't. And then it has a, 1 minute cooldown, I think, which is not particularly long, can be really, really, really nice. Now, unfortunately, Protoss doesn't have repair. If they did have repair or medics or something like that, I mean, they do have a couple repair abilities, but you cannot Guardian Shell and Repair Beam at the same time. If they had more reliable access to those abilities, then this would be S tier. However, it is still very, very, very solid. They do have, this works fantastically with repair carriers, by the way, in case you've ever done that combination. And you know what? Repair Beam also works really well with repair carriers. This ability, 3 repair beams at a time can be active on all your stuff, which means Protoss just doesn't have as many troops. And it's kind of the reverse of regenerative biosteel, where if you only have a couple guys, this just keeps everybody patched up and happy. And you just stop kind of losing stuff when you have this active a lot of the time. And that's really, really, really nice. It's also automatic. You don't have to do anything, which is fantastic. It could be a unit anywhere on the map. You just send it back home. If you just hit stop on it while you're attacking with the rest of your guys, pull it back a little bit, doesn't matter. It'll just do it. And as a result, very flexible, very powerful, but cannot be S tier because it only works on robotic units. It doesn't work on your adepts or anything like that. Purifier Beam is a solid A tier. The fact that it costs 0 Solarite is insane because it does so much damage. It does 1,500 to armored targets. That almost one-shots most of the objectives in the game. Like, if you're doing the carrier mission, I believe that if you're lower than brutal difficulty, it will one-shot any of the objectives. And if you're on brutal difficulty, you can fire this and 1 Solar Lance to kill any of the objectives. It moves pretty quick. It is amazing on the final mission because it is those really tight lanes. You just drop a Purifier Beam and the Zerg run through it and they don't run out the other side. It's awesome. It's real, real good. Time Stop, on the other hand, is real, real good. It is another S tier, easily the best ability on the Spear of Adun. I mean, okay, Solar Lance, easily the strongest button you can hit on the Spear of Adun. Solar Lance might be better because you can fire off more of them. However, Time Stop just, I mean, if you don't want to know what the enemy does, you can always hit this button and it doesn't really matter what your army is at that point. You're going to be happy. And then finally, Solar Bombardment. Well, sucks to be you. If I was just judging the ability itself, it would probably be C tier. It's very inconsistent, it's inaccurate, and if you are not actively fighting the enemy at the time, it'll like push enemies out of the area and then they'll just walk away and not be hit by it. So it's frustrating and you can't snipe stuff with it, and it mostly just leaves some like bruised people where Purifier Beam would have killed them instead, and it costs 100 Solarite to do all of that, which is way worse than the other ultimates, which as a result, I can't rate it anything better than D. It did get way buffed in co-op though, and the co-op version is quite good. So yeah, that is my position on all of the laboratory abilities, Kerrigan abilities, and Spear of Adun abilities in StarCraft. I think this is a pretty reasonable distribution. Just looking at this, it's fairly Gaussian, which is generally what you're looking for in something like this. I do think that the upgrades tend to be fairly good, so the fact that it skews a little bit above B is probably correct. Yeah, I think I'm very happy with this. Thank you guys for watching. I hope that my methodology makes a lot of sense here, and I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys tomorrow and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.